Hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy Victory Monday. And it feels good to be here after a victory, especially after what we went through last week. So, we've got some stuff to talk about, and most of it this week is going to be positive, at least. We can say that, right? You win a game, you can mostly be pretty positive. So, we're going to lead off with probably the most exciting and encouraging thing from that game yesterday, and that is the Seahawks' ability to generate yards after the catch. So, Next Gen Stats has the information here. The Seahawks gained 258 yards after the catch in their Week 10 victory over the Commanders, the second most yards after the catch in a game by any offense this season. So, that was not only a high point for this offense, that's very close to a high point for any offense in the entire NFL. The breakdown would be first we got Tyler Lockett. He had half of his yards come after the catch. And Tyler Lockett, as we all know, is a guy who usually doesn't get a lot of yards after the catch because he doesn't fight for them. But in this game, we actually found creative and interesting ways to utilize him that did result in some pretty good yak. There was DK Metcalf as well. Now, most of his yards were still through the air, but he generated 40 yards after the catch, including a really important series of yards after the catch on that final meaningful offensive play where he sets up the field goal. That was obviously probably the most important offensive play of the game in by some definition, and he was able to make that happen. So big yard after the catch for him, and then you had the big ones really. The K9 yards after the catch, all of his yards were yards after the catch since he caught a screen pass and housed it. And then you have JSN, all of his yards were also yards after the catch because you lose air yards for catches that are behind the line of scrimmage, which two of his catches were. So put it all together, it adds up to 258. Now, those are just the top four guys. I know that Disley had some yards after the catch in this game. I know that Charbonnet did. I think that Fant had a little bit. So there were some other guys as well involved, but these are the four big ones. Now, there are a couple different ways to look at this, but I do want to cover one thing that I know is going to be said as this week goes on. In fact, I'm sure people are already saying it, so I do want to go ahead and address this. There are going to be a lot of people out there who try to use this to discredit the game that Geno Smith had because, in theory, his receivers did all the work. And there is a little bit of truth to the idea that yards after the catch have more to do with the receiver than the quarterback. It kind of depends on the play. Like the K9 play. Yeah, Geno doesn't really do that much on that play. He did throw an accurate screen pass, but K9 was the one who really did the hard work on that play. I got no problem acknowledging that if you're talking about Geno's game. Those are, what was it, 60 something yards that he honestly had way more to do with K9 than Geno Smith. But there are other plays. And generally speaking, on most plays that generate yards after the catch, the quarterback needs to place the ball properly so the receiver can catch the ball in position to go get yards after the catch. So, like that last play to Metcalf where he runs for an extra, what was it, 15 yards to set up the easier field goal. That's a play where if Geno doesn't throw the accurate ball, Metcalf isn't in as good a position to go get yards after the catch. But the throw was accurate, so therefore he got to go get it. So let me just address that right now. No, us having a ton of yards after the catch does not mean that Geno Smith actually played a bad game and the yards after the catch don't count. You need to be able to throw an accurate ball in order to generate those extra yards, which he did. So just to address that quick point of it, because I understand where the discourse is regarding Geno Smith. People are going to try to say this invalidates the good stuff he did in this game because he didn't deserve it, because other players did stuff to make his stats look way better than they should have been. That's not how football works most of the time. Some plays, yes, absolutely. If you dump it off to K9 at the line of scrimmage and he takes it 65 yards, of course, that's on K9. But a lot of these plays are only generating yards after the catch because Geno hits the throw. So that element out of the way, I want to talk about something more big picture here, something a little more meaningful, something that isn't just, talking about something that ultimately doesn't matter that much, right? Like, who cares who gets the credit for us getting all these yards. The thing that matters is that we get all these yards. But the Seattle Seahawks are not a good yards after the catch team. They really haven't been for some time. But so far this year, they've been near the bottom. I got this leaderboard from stats.com, and you can see the Seahawks are actually almost in the bottom 5. This was before this week, by the way. This was before this week. The Seahawks are 27th in the league in yards after the catch with 820. There are some teams out there, many teams actually, that have over 1,000. There are a couple teams that have almost 1,000. So the Seahawks are one of the worst teams in the league in yards after the catch. So as of right now, this is an aberration. Don't get me wrong. This is not indicative of who we always are all of a sudden. We're going to have to do good yard after the catch stuff going forward to earn that. But this is something of an indication that things are starting to trend in the right direction, because when you think about Shane Waldron, when you think about the Rams offense that he came from, and when you think about Sean McVay, part of what they do is get yards after the catch. The last year Sean McVay was in LA with the Rams, which was 2020. The Rams were 5th in the league in yards after the catch, and they were 5th in the league in yards after the catch per completion. So they were one of the most prolific yard after the catch teams in the entire NFL. Their offense heavily depended on their ability to get extra yards post catch. So when we brought Shane Waldron over and the Sean McVay offense with it, or at least some version of it, we thought we were going to get some improvements to yards after the catch, and that has not really been the case so far. Our screens have been mostly a disaster. We have one of the worst screen games in the league over the last few years. There are very few plays where we generate big things after the catch. We have a star receiver on this team who we all love, but we all have to acknowledge the guy typically looks to avoid contact rather than fight for extra yards. So to a certain extent, we've kind of made our peace with the fact that we're not going to get a lot of yards after the catch. But we've got other players on this team who could do it. Metcalf could get yards after the catch. When we had Goodwin last year, we had tight ends last year. These things are doable, but we typically didn't do them. We got what we got through the air, and that was that. So if this is to be somehow indicative of this offense finally starting to get the personnel and the understanding of things needed to generate yards after the catch, then that is something that can only be a positive thing, because that indicates that we're starting to really run the offense that we are meant to be running. Generating these big plays after the catch has to be a part of the plan with this Waldron offense, or else what did he learn under Sean McVay? Why did we hire him from the McVay tree thinking we want to do what McVay does if he's not going to be able to do those things? And there's obviously been big problems with Waldron this year. I'm not saying he called an amazing game against Washington. It was obviously a much better game. But I look at this and I go, this is a very encouraging sign. It tells me that some of the things that he wants to do, some of the things that he's probably wanted to do over the last few years that he hasn't been able to do, are starting to settle in. We're starting to see screens work. We're starting to see the bubble screens. We're starting to see those little tosses to receivers in the backfield. And they're starting to actually work. Not perfectly. They don't work every time, but they're actually starting to be a net positive here. So I don't know what else to say about that other than it's great news and an indication this is working. Because obviously, I think that there's still some dissatisfaction with the Seahawks offense right now, and there should be, because it's not as good as it should be based on the talent. Based on the expectations from last year, there's no way this offense should not even be a top 10 unit. And right now, in terms of points per game, they're not. In terms of yards, they're definitely not. So it's definitely not moving as quickly as we want it to. But I am starting to get the sense here that if you look at something like this, it means that the intended changes to this offense are finally starting to settle in. We're getting the personnel for it. JSN's good at running screens. We ran multiple productive screens with him in this most recent game. Not that he had an amazing game, but he was able to get yards via the screen a couple times. We were able to do it a little bit with Lockett. We did it a little bit with Metcalf. We did it, of course, with K9, Charbonnet, And these things are going to start adding up. And I do think that of all the things that are starting to go wrong with this offense, there are some things going right here that need to be called out. Now, we're going to have to do this more over the next several games. We're going to have to show that we are still a yard after the catch team. We're going to have to show that this game wasn't a fluke, because one thing that we did in this game that allowed us to get big yards after the catch was we threw intermediate passes. We threw slants. We threw comebackers with defenders playing very soft on the receiver. If we stop doing those things, the yards after the catch, I mean, you're only going to be able to do so much with screen passes, right? So that's just the big story right now, I think. And you can take this many different ways. If you take a look at the data here, you take a look at the numbers, you can interpret it the way you want to. But for me personally, I look at this and I go, something is starting to click with the way this offense is meant to be run. The Shane Waldron offense needs this kind of stuff to be itself. And for all the problems with the offense so far this year, this stuff is starting to work. See you guys later. Go Hawks. More videos coming later.